Democrat of the day. Let us head on over to 63B. This is Emma Greenman. She's kind enough to join us today to talk about her campaign. Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I've got to ask you one question about your district, because your district,
yes.
you got Nokomis. You got one of the prettiest lakes in the entire state in your district. You've got you're very southeastern Minneapolis, North Richfield, and the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. And are there many people that live? Oh, I know that they do have voters over there. I'm just are there a lot of people that live over by MSP?
You know, we also have Fort Snelling, and that there's not that many people who live there. There's a strip of land where folks live right next to the airport, but it is the whole district. It's a really interesting and diverse district, but it's a lot of folks who are deeply engaged in our democracy, and so that's the thing that ties us together.
I think that's one of the best parts whenever I watch like a primary night. I'm a numbers geek, and I'll go through and I'll look, and this is the reason why, is when they put out those numbers about Ilhan Omar winning the Minnesota 5 primary. I was looking, it's like in Fort Snelling, or it's in Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport area, and it was like 100 votes, and I'm like, are they living at the terminal? I mean, is it one of those things? But yeah, it's a great district.
Yeah, and I would just say, since you gave it a plug, this last primary night we had the highest voter turnout in 50 years, and so it is. I think that the fifth as a whole had great turnout, but the voting rights lawyer in me has to make sure to take the opportunity to really talk about how people are engaged and turning out this year in a pandemic, nonetheless.
Outstanding indeed. So why don't we know a little bit about you? Why don't you explain to everyone out there who exactly is Emma Greenman?
Yes. Well, I am so grateful to be here talking to you about, and I'm really glad lots of folks just think the district is South Minneapolis, but it is South Minneapolis, East and Richfield, Fort Snelling. And I grew up in the district. I got my start as an organizer on the Wellstone campaign, actually in the 5th Congressional District. And I am running, and sort of my background is in organizing. I'm a voting rights lawyer, and I really believe in the power of us in our democracy, in our government, to make really critical change. I am running to represent the district I grew up in, and for folks who know Minneapolis, I lived on both ends of Cedar Avenue with my mom, though we've moved around a lot. And it was a housing subsidy. It was an affordable housing subsidy that allowed us to move into the apartment at Cedar Riverside Plaza. And so that government investment is the reason that my family had stability and had the security that was hard to find with my mom's mental illness and that poverty that came with it. So, and the other end of the Cedar Avenue, it was a little less complicated with my dad, but I also was an enthusiastic public school kid and struggled to learn how to read. And it was Barton Open School for those Minneapolis public school folks that put me on a path, those teachers, the educators, and frankly, Minnesota's commitment to public education that are the reason I'm here and they're the reason that I'm doing the work I do. And so when I thought about stepping up to run, in a year 2020 where really the power of people are under attack, to me what is most critical and what I am most eager to really build is that power, that people power in our democracy, and to really get to work repairing and reimagining our democracy to put people at the center.
So, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but yeah, that was you're going to represent the district. You believe you can make a change. That got you into saying, I'm going to go for the House. Every 2 years, I'm going to run for this baby.
Well, I think look, we have to do this together, and so I think about running for the House. One of the things I'm most excited about. I'm excited about the really strong leadership in the House. I think that there's a lot of really progressive and really inclusive coalition building happening. Yes. And, yes. It starts with the voters in my district. And I think people are really ready to go to the legislature and really see a much more people-centered governance than we've seen from a divided government, where I think that the Senate Republicans have really stood in the way of a lot of the policies that the public really wants.
It's an interesting district because and one of the things I'll say about that part, the Nokomis area and that part of Richfield that you're in, there are these magical parts of the city where it feels – I've lived in small-town America. It feels small-townish. It really does. Your district – well, not the airport itself. I mean, that's one thing. But I mean, the parts of Minneapolis, the parts of Richfield, there is a vibe there that is small town. But as well, on the opposite side, you do have the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. You have major roadways that go through there. I mean, it's for the residents there. A lot of traffic and stuff like that. There's some issues there. You do have. You've got those community issues, but then you have those larger metro area issues. Including a major national, international airport that you have to keep on your radar scope as you're trying to represent this district.
Yeah, and I think, where I start is like talking and listening to folks in the district, and really the conversation we've been having for the last 9 months since I started running in November is about, what we can do together, what people want to prioritize. And the nice thing about having a little bit of Minneapolis and a little bit of Richfield is I'm talking to folks. I'm talking to teachers and students and parents and workers on both sides of in the city and in the suburbs. And like you said, there's folks who live, in single-family homes. There's folks who live around lakes. There's folks who live in apartment buildings. And I think what the issues that folks are raising about needing, and people are talking about the pandemic and really needing a coordinated response, and also needing to make sure that we are educating our kids and fully funding education for our kids. We were talking about that before, even more so now, making sure that folks have health care and all of those issues that are on people's minds aren't really that different. And I appreciate you sort of the way that people care for each other, I think, especially as we've seen in the pandemic, as we've seen the real urgency of embracing and really talking about the issues of systemic racism and the fight for racial justice. I've been in people's living rooms and before the pandemic, and now in people's yards and in church fields, and people are really talking about and engaging their neighbors in how we care for each other. And I think that is both small town and big city, but it is a really important piece of both the district and I hope the rest of the region and the state.
I think my youngest daughter might actually end up living in your district eventually. She loves the houses around Nokomis in that area there, and it's just
we are actively seeking more 63 beers.
Well, she's 13 now, but I mean we'll drive her in that direction. Okay, it's a great convenient area there. Good restaurants too. So for you then, with the dichotomy of the district, what is the main issue that you really want to fight for most of all for 63B?
Yeah, so I think, and this is where I've started, this is why I became a voting rights lawyer, and I've been fighting, here in Minnesota and around the country, is I don't think that we are going to be able to make the change and solve the problems that we need to solve, education, healthcare, climate change, racial and economic inequalities, if we actually don't have a functioning democracy that really responds to the needs and the desires and, frankly, the participation of people. And so that's where I start. It's both my day job, where I've spent the last 15 years and last 10 years as a lawyer, but also when I go to the legislature, I think that, we're not going to make progress on healthcare or climate change if we don't deal with the issues of the distorting issues of money in our politics. And we shouldn't have a conversation about criminal justice reform if we don't actually restore the right to vote and ensure that we're centering the voices of folks who have been incarcerated. And so I think, I think there are a lot of issues that people in my district and that I want to work on. And it starts with the fundamentally the power of people to make those decisions and make policy decisions together. So I think about that as voting rights and money in politics. And we're going to be looking at redistricting and making sure that that folks have fair representation and really feel good about the government and participating.
What's interesting about this, and this is a tough fight that is your primary issue here, your number one issue in this deal. You're dealing with a party across the aisle who, first of all, hate you because you're from Minneapolis or from Richfield. You're from the cities. You are persona non grata as far as they're concerned. And on top of that, as much as they scream about the metro area has to keep their nose out of our business, they love to stick their nose into Minneapolis-St. Paul business. And so this idea, I mean, it's why when you see the money pouring into outstate campaigns and Republican coffers, just so that they will go in there and try to meddle in what's going on in Minneapolis-St. Paul. If you can tackle that, I mean, getting the money out of these politics is such a good idea because it would allow for the return of what I call the localization of the policy and the issues, and I think that's the primary goal that needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I actually think when you look at where the public is at, I think that the current Republican Party is so out of step, and the lawmakers with where the public is at and where their own voters are even at. I mean, I would just sort of take an issue that is near and dear to my heart, which is when the pandemic hit, we've been working really hard to ensure that every voter can cast a ballot and they don't have to choose between their vote and a virus. And 75% of Minnesotans said, send every registered voter a ballot. That just makes sense to me. And Mayor Kiffmeyer and Gazelka, they stood up and said, no, we're going to make people make these choices. And I think you could say on down the line on what they're doing around, what they've done around the Dolly Commissioner and who is enforcing labor laws and sort of on the line. So what I would say is I actually think when we think about getting money out of our politics and about getting voters in, that is actually the solution. Like making lawmakers more accountable to the public and to where public opinion is at, I think will actually get us a lot further to coming up with those solutions that are really taking care of people. Because right now, corporations and special interests have a lot more sway, particularly on the Republican side right now with Trump and down the line.
And by the way, I should remind her with the Department of Labor and Industry commissioner that they fired, the Republicans fired a woman because they were angry at a man. End of story, end of discussion. That's what they did, and they should be held accountable for that.
Happens more often than you think.
Yeah, I don't know if this is their goal to try to appeal to suburban voters. Good luck with that. All right, so I want to – and by the way, Emma Greenman is joining us, Democrat of the Day, 63B. Let's talk about education. I know it's probably something you're talking a lot about in regards to your district here because it's coming up here. What have you been hearing from the constituents of the district in regards to education? Because this is not – there is nothing easy about this whole thing.
No, I think that's right. And that's what I hear from both parents and teachers is there's no good options, right? That we are in a global pandemic and we have for years underinvested in, the infrastructure of our schools and our school districts. They're facing, we have not fully funded our schools for years. And so on top of that, we're also just putting a really, really hard situation in. One of the things I hear is how important it is to really balance, but really making sure that we're keeping teachers and kids and their families safe, right? So when we are thinking about, we're guided by science, and we're also making sure that we're investing the resources to make sure that we have the space and the PPE and all of those things if districts are making the decision to go back, and they're not making the decision to go back based on political pressure, but actually based on what's best for kids and for teachers and families. I don't think anybody who tells you it's an easy call is wrong. Yeah. Because it really requires a lot of balancing. But I am hearing a lot from teachers and parents and kids who are struggling right now. And I think what it means as we move forward, we also need to be really clear about this is not just the pandemic. This is actually the structural inequities and the underinvestment are putting us in a tougher spot than we otherwise would be.
And this is not so much Minnesota. I was reading about what they're doing down in Iowa, and it just is. There does seem to be this. I can force this to work, and you cannot negotiate with the virus. And I think this is. I don't know a teacher that doesn't want to get back to the classroom, but they also don't want to be sick or die. When we could have taken precautions to prevent it. So we get through this hopefully better as a society. But until we get people who stop thinking they can scream their way out of this, I don't know what else you're going to do.
And I would just say to that, too, because I think that's really important. And that sort of comes back to one of the reasons I'm running is I do think we are more than the sum of our parts and we do things better together. Yes. And the biggest failure here is a lack of leadership from the top, a lack of actually being able to use all of the federal resources we have and having a really coordinated response. But it's also a 40 years of a worldview that says you're on your own, like rugged individualism, and greed is king. And I hope coming out of the pandemic that's what we tackle, right?
Yeah.
That we actually say we're going to invest in the power of all of us through government and through our collective power, because I think that will be the path forward.
I agree. The age of greed needs to die. And, I mean, we need to end it, and we need a better society, because the greed-based, Ayn Rand-based society does not work. Emma Greenman, once again, I put out the plea here to everyone: go help your local Republic. Go help your local Democrat there. Help your local Democrat. Help your local district. Represent them correctly. That's what I was trying to say. Represent your own district. Help out. But if you have some time, you can help out in 63B to a fine Democrat, Emma Greenman. 63B, once again, it's in the metro area, so a lot of people who are listening right now, they could donate. They can door knock, or whatever the virtual version of that is today.
Phone bank.
They can phone bank, and they can help out the campaign. How do they get in touch with your campaign to help you out there?
Yeah, the best ways is to go to our website at Emma Greenman, GreenMan.com, and we are absolutely folks in their own district, right? I just want to put in the plug that voting is going to be harder this year, and so making sure that folks are voting early, whichever way you feel comfortable, and that people are talking to their neighbors to make folks sure that they're registered and voting. So do that in your district, and then come help us out, help other candidates out who are doing the work, because that's how we are going to, one, make sure that we have really high participation, and also how we're going to win in November. EmmaGreenman.com.
That's, by the way, a nice get. Emma, EmmaGreenman.com. I'll link to everything a little bit later on social media. Emma, all my best. Congratulations on being the DFL nominee over there, and we'll definitely see you in St. Paul. I believe we got a good chance of taking that seat.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in 63B.
Absolutely. I'll be over there.
And your daughter.
And Nokomis is fantastic. I love your district. It's a wonderful district. Emma Greenman, Democrat of the Day. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show right here on AM 950.